Welcome to another episode. I'm so excited today to speak with Chris Herring, formerly NBA writer with the Wall Street Journal covering the New York Knicks and currently with ESPN 538 as a senior NBA writer. Without further ado, Chris Herring.
Thank you for having me. I'm hoping to someday be done with a book that I'm writing about the 1990s New York Knicks with Pat Riley, Patrick Ewing, John Starks, those teams. But it's taken me a while. At this point, I'm about a year and a half into it, between the reporting and talking to a couple hundred people and the writing process. I've got to try to turn my manuscript in by, I think, January or February. So that's kind of what I'm aiming for. And then the book would come out late next year or, God forbid, early 2022.
With the 2020 season, currently there's been a lot of rumors out there, trade rumors out there in regarding Russell Westbrook and also possibly Chris Paul going to the New York Knicks. And so I'm wondering, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because I covered them from 2012 to 2016, and they haven't, they've only had one really decent season, good season in the last 7 or 8 years, which I think whenever you're talking about that, whenever you're talking about a team that has the fewest wins over the last 20 years in the NBA, on the one hand, you've got a certain segment of the fan base that wants the team to be patient and to build it the right way. The Knicks just hired a new president. They obviously hired a new coach in Tom Thibodeau. And so patience would be letting this play out, making use of the high draft pick you have now, allowing the, last year's draft pick, RJ Barrett, to just kind of grow and develop as a player, and hoping that you've got the right development staff to get the most out of him. On the other hand, because they haven't won anything in a long time and been competitive in a long time, you also have people that just want them to be decent and do whatever it takes to go out and throw, whether it's money, whether it's picks or, a trade or something like that, at a team to get, a proven bona fide star on the team, whether that's Westbrook or Chris Paul. I do think, obviously, there could be something added by the idea of going out and getting a Chris Paul and hoping that he rubs off on the young players that you've got left over after whatever trade you would make. But I don't think it makes a whole lot of sense to go out, do that, and, maybe you become a playoff team, maybe you get the 7th or the 8th seed and you barely sneak into the playoffs. But to give up actual assets, to give up, whether it would be a first-round pick or to give up a young player that you really feel good about, that you think will be good, that's where I start to think that would be a little bit silly. And, watching the Knicks operate in the past, they've always kind of done things like that, where they give up on something early that looks sort of promising for whatever reason, whether it's their own hand and wanting to go out and get Carmelo Anthony in the middle of the season where they're somewhat competitive, pretty competitive, would make the playoffs with a young team and guys that you can build around, and then kind of giving up on that early. And whether it's that or whether it is trading Kristaps Porzingis because the relationship with him has kind of gone bad. And who knows, maybe that was the right decision anyway because of his injury history. But it would be nice to just kind of see them stick to something as opposed to kind of it's like someone that keeps tapping their mom on the shoulder and say, "Mom, I want that," because of the commercial they see on TV. You can do that every now and then, but when you do it all the time, it starts to seem like you don't have discretion of what you actually want to push for.
Mm-hmm. I like that perspective. And so I just wanted to switch gears a little bit to your town of Chicago and talk a little bit about the Bulls, because why not? So Jalen Rose, Jalen and Jacoby, had mentioned now that Anthony Davis has a ring that he would be most likely interested in returning to Chicago sometime in his future within his career to bring them home a championship. And I was very interested to know, would that mean anything to the Chicagoland at all, Anthony Davis returning? And do you think that that's plausible for him? Is he capable of bringing that championship to Chicago if that's something that he's in fact interested in?
I think the last part of what you said is the key. Like, is he actually interested in that? Yes, I believe that when you win a title and when you've won, it probably makes you think more about, okay, I'm not going to retire. Not that there'd be anything wrong with the idea of not finishing with a championship. We've seen Charles Barkley, Karl Malone, Patrick Ewing players like that not win one.
Mm-hmm.
But, Anthony Davis is still very young, too. And so, for the same reasons that we didn't see Dwayne Wade clamoring to come back to Chicago right after he won a championship in what was that, 2005 or 2006. I think it's possible, but I don't think that it's likely that he's going to do that right now, particularly when he's in LA. It seems like, by all accounts, he likes it there.
Mm-hmm.
Granted, they were in the bubble, not in LA for the end of the season. But, he's playing with the player that clearly can help lift him to those heights. The Bulls seem like a far, more than a stone's throw away from that. And quite frankly, he just left a situation where he wasn't really winning. And the Bulls don't have really a bona fide guy that is so good that it would put them in contention with him. And I think it would be incumbent on the Bulls to kind of prove to him why he shouldn't stay there. And I don't really think the Bulls have many good reasons to offer, except for the idea of you're from here, which that's not really a good selling point. You want to be able to show that you've got players that are ready to take the next step. Granted, Zach LaVine is there, but Zach LaVine couldn't take this team to the playoffs on his own. So I don't know. I don't think it's that likely. Certainly not right now. Maybe later in his career, but I've been wrong before.
And so it's probably way too early to really get into this conversation, seeing that we just wrapped the last season. But I'm wondering, any far too early predictions for next season? Maybe who are your top 5 teams that you feel like are really in the conversation for the championship next year?
Well, I think obviously you have to put the Lakers in there, assuming that Anthony Davis doesn't go anywhere. So them for sure. But also the idea that, that is a team that is not young. They've got questions about which free agents will come back. I think Rondo, basically a lot of that roster will be in free agency this year. I think Rondo is one, and you've got Dwight Howard now that will be able to kind of figure out what he wants to do.
Mm-hmm.
Guys that seemingly earn themselves bigger paydays than what the Lakers might be able to afford now. And a number of other guys that kind of fit that scenario, on top of the fact that Anthony Davis is going to likely opt out to take more money, whether it's from the Lakers or someone else. But the team that will be interesting, that it just kind of feels like everybody has forgotten about now, or maybe some people, the Warriors were expected to be competitive last year before everything around them just kind of came crashing down. Steph Curry breaks a finger, days into a season. And now, you figure you get him back, you get Klay Thompson back. The Warriors have a top 3 pick now that you're looking at. And, what do they want to do with that pick? Do they want to keep it? Do they want to trade it? If they trade it, what do they get for it? They have Andrew Wiggins, who is not necessarily one of my favorite players, and is productive, but productive in kind of a I can score, but I'm not going to do anything else sort of way. Can they get more out of him? Can Steve Kerr kind of get more out of him as a player? So they're, if nothing else, they're a team that's interesting, that just based on the winning they've done in the past, some of it with Durant, some of it without, can they kind of get back to where they were? Can they, kind of show what they were before Kevin Durant got there, and build the right pieces around that team without an Andre Iguodala and without some of the guys like that? So I think you have to at least kind of include them in that conversation. Boston will be really interesting to figure out what they do with Gordon Hayward. And obviously some of their young players, Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, their team I think you have to watch out for again. Toronto will be interesting. And Milwaukee, is a team that was on pace for 70 wins that fell really flat really quickly, obviously against the Heat. And it'll be a huge year to figure out whether or not they're able to retain Giannis based on what happens in the playoffs, whether he's interested in going somewhere else. So those would probably be my 5 teams, which probably isn't shedding any real light on anything because those were probably the same 5 teams basically last year as well. Denver will be too, just based on what we saw from Jamal Murray in the playoffs.
Yeah. I think also you mentioned briefly, but it wasn't officially in your top 5, but the Heat. And I'm excited also to see what the Clippers will do promoting Ty Lue as well. So I'm really kind of rooting for the Clippers, for them to step out of the shadows of the Lakers in Los Angeles. I think it's an interesting squad they have there, and what they're building, I think is really exciting.
Yeah, it was so strange to not see that be the Western Conference Finals matchup. Obviously Denver deserved it based on the fact that they came back, and but it blew up a whole lot of things. Obviously, Doc Rivers not being there, and now the Clippers will be interesting as well because they've got 3 pretty key free agents. I think Lou Williams, Montrezl Harrell, and I want to say JaMychal Green, who's kind of one of the bench players, are all free agents. And on the one hand, Trez just won Sixth Man of the Year. Lou Williams had won it for a bunch of years before that. Maybe they seem like obvious choices, but what does that team need? Kawhi Leonard, I think everybody on the planet knows they could really use a point guard, more of a traditional point guard, outside of just maybe Patrick Beverley. But it's a team that clearly needs something, if nothing else, maybe a little bit more heart than what they showed this year. But talent-wise, you can't find many teams that have more talent than they do. Yeah. It was really surprising to see them and the Bucks bow out the way they did.
Yeah. All right, Chris. Well, for people who want to connect with you, where can they do so?
I feel like I'm an old head. I basically only use Twitter as far as social media, but I'm on there, and my Twitter handle is Herring. My last name Herring _ NBA.
Perfect. Well, that will conclude our formal interview together. Thank you so much for taking the time to join me today.
I appreciate you having me, Sunday. Thank you.